kids, it's Aunt Molly. I have a new story for you today. I had a little bit more productive day. I realized that I didn't do two things yesterday. Glasses, check, check, that I needed to do. Raggedy, check, check. Thumbs up. Um, Yesterday I didn't write a to-do list, and I also didn't go on my walk. And by the end of the day, I just didn't feel like doing anything. So I realized that during this sequester that everybody's on, I have to either do yoga at home or take a walk every day, and I have to write a to-do list. And I might not get everything done, but I can transfer whatever's on today's list to tomorrow's list. But it really did help me quite a bit. So I got quite a bit done, and glad to see everybody. And without further ado, we are starting a new story tonight. I don't have any costumes or anything tonight because I'm trying to get my momentum back up, but I'll get rolling with some fun stuff later next week, okay? Or this next week. All right, so I'm going to go back to another Grimm's fairy tale, and we'll just see how this goes. You know, sometimes Grimm is a little grim, but in a sense, it's also interesting. You know, a lot of it's the basis of a lot of our Disney movies. I was looking through the list of titles, and one of them is The Frog Prince, you know, which ended up being a Disney movie, and Cinderella, and well, I don't know if that's grim, but anyway, you know, some of these things I'm reading to you are companion pieces to pieces that ended up being famous movies later on. So they just haven't been made into a movie yet, is the way I think about them. So without further ado, I'm going to read you a couple of pages of The Raven. Are you ready to go, Raggedy? Okay, here we go. All right. The Raven by the Brothers Grimm. There once was a queen who had a little daughter, still too young to run alone. One day the child was very troublesome, and the mother could not quiet her, do what she may. She grew impatient, and seeing the ravens flying around the castle, she opened the window and said, "I wish you were a raven and could fly away. Then I would have a little peace." Scarcely were the words out of her mouth when the child in her arms was turned into a raven. Whoa! And flew away from her through the open window. The bird took its flight to a dark wood and remained there for a long time, and meanwhile the parents heard nothing from their child. Long after this, a man was making his way through the wood when he heard a raven calling, and he followed the sound of the voice. As he drew near, the raven said, "I am by birth a king's daughter, but now am under the spell of some enchantment. You, however, can set me free." "What am I to do?" he asked. She replied, "Go farther into the wood until you come to a house wherein lives an old woman. She will offer you food and drink, but you must not take of either. If you do, you will fall into a deep sleep and will not be able to help me. In the garden behind the house is a large heap of tan leaves. On that you must stand and watch for me. I shall drive there in my carriage at 2 o'clock in the afternoon for 3 successive days. The first day it will be drawn by 4 white, the second by 4 chestnut horses, and the last by 4 black horses. But if you fail to keep awake and I find you sleeping, I shall not be set free." The man promised to do all that she wished, but the raven said, "Alas, I know even now that you will take something from the woman and be unable to save me." The man assured her again that he would on no account touch a thing to eat or drink. When he came to the house and went inside, the old woman met him and said, "Poor man, how tired you are. Come in and rest, and let me give you something to eat and drink." "No," answered the man, "I will not eat nor drink." But she would not leave him alone and urged him, saying, "If you will not eat or drink, at least you might take a drink of wine. One drink counts for nothing." And at last he allowed himself to be persuaded, and he drank. As it drew towards the appointed hour, he went outside to the garden and mounted the tan heap of leaves to await the raven. Suddenly, a feeling of fatigue came over him, and unable to resist it, he lay down for a while, fully determined, however, to keep awake. But in another minute his eyes were closed of their own accord, and he fell into such a deep sleep that all the noises in the world could not have awakened him. At 2 o'clock the raven came driving along, drawn by her 4 white horses, but even before she reached the spot, she said to herself, sighing, "I know he has fallen asleep." When she entered the garden, she found him as she had feared, lying on the heap of tan leaves, fast asleep. She got out of her carriage and went to him. She called him and shook him, but it was all in vain. He still continued sleeping. The next day at noon, the old woman came to him again with food and drink, which he at first refused. At last, overcome by her persistent let's try that again, shall we? At last, overcome by her one more time. At last, maybe I should slow down. One more time. Okay. At last, overcome by her persistent entreaties that he would take something, he lifted a glass and drank some wine again. Towards 2 o'clock, he went into the garden, and on the heap of tan leaves, he began to watch for the raven. He had not been there long before he began to feel so tired that his limbs seemed hardly able to support him, and he could not stand upright any longer. So again he lay down and fell fast asleep. As the raven drove along her 4 chestnut horses, she said sorrowfully to herself, "I know he has fallen asleep." She went as before to look for him, but he slept, and it was impossible to waken him. The following day the old woman said to him, "What is this? You are not eating or drinking anything? Do you want to kill yourself?" Yikes, that's pretty extreme language. Okay. He said, "I may not and will not neither eat nor drink." But she put down the dish of food and the glass of wine in front of him, and when he smelled the wine, he was unable to resist the temptation, and he took a deep drink. When the hour came round again, he went as usual to the heap of tan leaves in the garden to await the king's daughter. But he felt even more overcome with weariness than on the 2 previous days, and throwing himself down, he slept like a log. At 2 o'clock, the raven could be seen approaching, and this time her coachman and everything about her, as well as her horses, were black. She was sadder than ever as she drove along, and said mournfully, "I know he has fallen asleep and will not be able to set me free." She found him sleeping heavily, and all her efforts to awaken him were of no avail. Then she placed beside him a loaf and some meat and a flask of wine, of such a kind that however much he took of them, they would never grow less. After that she drew a gold ring on which her name was engraved off her finger and put it on one of his. Finally she laid a letter near him in which, after giving him particulars of the food and drink she had left for him, she finished with the following words: "I see that as long as you remain here you will never be able to set me free. If, however, you still wish to do so, come to the golden castle of Stromberg. This is well within your power to accomplish." Then she returned to her carriage and drove to the golden castle of Stromberg. When the man awoke and found that he had been sleeping, he was grieved at heart and said, "She has no doubt been here and driven away again, and now it is too late for me to save her." Then his eyes fell on things which were lying beside him. He read the letter and knew from it all that had happened. He rose up without delay, eager to start on his way and to reach the castle Stromberg, but he had no idea in which direction he ought to go. He traveled about a long time in search of it, and came at last to a dark forest, through which he went on walking 14 days and still could not find a way out. Once more the night the night came on and wore out, and he lay down under a bush and fell asleep. Again, the next day he pursued his way through the forest, and that evening, thinking to rest again, he lay down as before, but he heard such howling and wailing that he found it impossible to sleep. He waited till it was darker and people had begun to light up their houses, and then seeing a little glimmer ahead of him, he went towards it. Okay, that's where we're going to stop for tonight. I love everybody. I hope you're holding up okay during this weird time. And I miss everyone. Me and Raggedy are sending everybody a lot of hugs and kisses. Mwah! Mwah! That's better. Wait, let's try this again. Mwah! All right, good night, everybody.